right. Okay, go. All right, bet. So we was just talking a lot about you know, what the web part of web dev means. And so now I kind of want to just show y'all just some more examples of that so that y'all can kind of put that in a context, right? And have something to hold true and near and dear to yourself. So what I'm gonna do first is just create a new browser window and yes, sir, ski. All right, cool. So first thing I want to do, let me share my screen for y'all. So the first thing I want to do, oops, let's go to the right window. Essentially, I wanted to show y'all, first of all, like some of the stuff we were just talking about. So we talked a lot about IP addresses, DNS, and stuff like that. We also talked about Sir Tim Berners-Lee. So I wanted to show y'all the first website. So the www project created at CERN. And let's see. So can we see that first web page that they created? Here it is. Voila, y'all. Y'all looking at the first ever website. Y'all believe me or y'all think I'm capping? If you believe me, drop a thumb up. If you think I'm capping, drop a thumb down. Dang, y'all believe me? Yeah, that's lit. I'm glad I got y'all trust. Oh, Cruz like, nah, boy, you capping. Annabelle like, you capping. This can't be the right first website. Nah.
So before it was called www, you used to be called W3.
So the www stands for World Wide Web, but because there's 3 W's, they said W3. You know what I'm saying? That's where when you see W3 all the time, it comes from this. So to answer the question above, I was not capping. This is the first website that they created, and it's a simple website, right? How many of y'all have seen websites that look like this, and y'all like, dang, this is some old school website, right? But this is exactly what they were trying to prove, was that they could create something that you could visually see. And here's the point that they were trying to prove with the first www project, was they wanted to create what's called a wide area hypermedia information retrieval initiative, aiming to give universal access to a large universe of documents. That's some movie level stuff right there. My man was like, I'm about to make this drawing. He said hypermedia, that's a drawing, cool, right? So the whole process, wide area. When we talk about wide area, they're talking about network size. So instead of local area networks, which are really small, they're talking about wide area, so bigger area, and hypermedia information. So what is hypermedia? So they define that, and hypermedia, also called hypertext, is text which is not constrained to be linear. It's text which contains links to other text, and it's meant to be like text that is meant to be linked to things that can include graphics, video, sound, right? Hypermedia can be like these ideal things that are you're linking people to files that include multimedia things as well. But the idea of hypertext was this, being able to create these links that create that type of reference, right? So if we take a look at some of the terms that they were using with hypertext, anchor, annotations, let's see, what are some other ones in here? Document, you know what I mean? All of these terms, once you start learning HTML, become very important, right? Because when they're talking about hypertext, right, is this idea of linking these various things on a web page, right? But the www project created, what was created out of this project was the creation of the language that we use, HTML, as well as the idea of a browser, right? The creation of the first browser, Sir Tim Berners-Lee and his team were the ones that created this, right? They created the thing that you could use to view stuff from the web, right? In order to create the web, they needed a way for computers to communicate. So they created HTTP. They needed something that those computers could send, HTML, and they needed a way to visualize that, right? And the browser came out of it. Not necessarily all in the same like quick time frame, but over time, they definitely created that. So the whole idea that they were trying to prove was, oh, well, if I can use the HTTP protocol, I could connect to a different computer, and that computer might be able to give me back some information like this in hypertext. And that hypertext, when I actually view it on a browser, I can interact with it. But I don't even need a web browser to reach out to other websites using HTTP. You can just use your terminal to do that, right? So I'm just going to open up my terminal, and let's just talk about this process a little bit further, right? So in the terminal, right, this is where I can type in commands for my operating system to follow, right? Because I'm on a Mac, I can use some Unix-based commands that are defined. I don't know if this command is the same on Windows. This is where I get a little stumped. I gotta make sure I'm pretty sure you can still use the host command in Windows. That's very true. But say for instance, what we were talking about earlier was about how IP addresses correspond to specific websites, right? So, I mean, for the sake of just kind of clarity, let's figure out what is the IP address of maybe like google.com, right? So in order to do that, I could use the host command and say, what is the IP address of google.com, right? So the host command, I don't know if y'all can see this. The host command allows you to type in a domain name and get back the IP address for that corresponding domain name. So 142.251.40.196 is Google's IP address. If you don't believe me, watch me copy this to the browser, press enter, and get taken to Google, because that's literally what it does. So the host command will give you the IP address of any of the domains that you're used to. So let's use this domain from the Sir Tim Berners-Lee's team, and let's just drop that in here, right? And just say host. Don't need the HTTP piece, I don't think, but let's see. Yeah, I don't need the HTTP piece, my bad. Oh man, maybe it's because of this whole domain. Let's see. Cool. So the domain name of this actual website is just this first piece, right? info.cern.ch. It can't actually find it based on the specific resource, but we see that this info CERN is an alias for this other thing. Here's the IP address. Let's just copy the IP address and see what comes back when we go to this particular server. So remember, the IP address is just what our computer uses to make a HTTP request over to get the data on the website. But just knowing a computer's IP address, you can connect to that computer using all of the other, using a number of different internet communication protocols like we were talking about. So this particular John, okay, so it takes me back, but this is an old website. So it's saying that, I think what's going on here is a pretty unique situation where this was an old website that they created that then they kind of have rerouting to other sites to kind of keep up over time. But we can see that it still went to a site. It went to the CERN website, but it gave us back a 404 because it couldn't find a resource to give back. But we can still see that IP address was pointed to something. So that kind of is a cool thing to do, right? Once you know like a computer's IP address, right? So let's use, for the sake of the example, let's stick with Google, right? So if we know that the host name for Google, or like the IP address of Google, is this, right? So I know that I can interact with Google's server by using that particular IP address, right? So here's me using the ping command to hit that server to see if this server is active, if I actually can make a connection to the server. And the ping command is showing me a couple little bit of data points that are coming back from Google server. So clearly this server is actually responding to that ping. Now what I can do is I'm going to show y'all how you can use a specific command to interact via the web without using a web browser, which is also a pretty cool thing to know. That command is curl. The curl command sends an HTTP request. So let's just type in curl on Google, and you'll see, curl. So curl, it says, is a computer software project that provides a library for transferring data using various network protocols. So you can use curl for other network protocols, but I think it defaults to HTTP. So you can use curl to actually hit different web servers with their IP address or with their domain name. So if I go to my terminal and like, if I do like a curl and let's paste that IP address for Google in there. So I get this really interesting thing back from Google actually, which is HTML, right? That is saying that the document has moved. So they actually, when you actually do a curl request to that specific server that we get back from Google, it actually gives you not the actual Google homepage back. It says that, oh, like this document has been moved to this link, google.com or whatnot. That one is still interesting because this returns some HTML. So we clearly are making like a request to a specific server. The server gave us back a response of some HTML, but it says like, hey, this got moved to google.com. So let's just try to curl request again and just do www.google.com because that's where it says that it got linked to. And let's just see what comes back there. Okay, this is some Google source code that comes back when you hit the Google server using the curl request, right? So this is kind of crazy, right? What is this? This looks like gibberish, but this is gibberish only because we're looking at it in the console. We could probably format this a lot better, but what's coming back here is also some HTML. You can see it here at the top. HTML is getting passed back to us. But if you look, we can see clearly like we're getting back some stuff from Google just through that one little curl request. So the curl request is a really cool command line tool that you can use to verify that servers are up and like you're getting back the data you expect from a server from a GET request. You can use curl to also do different requests. So we talked about GET, POST, delete, all those different types of requests. You can use curl to interact with those particular servers with those different requests as well. So it's a cool command line tool to know. But with that being said, right, now that we are seeing, so like if we look at this terminal output, we see that we should see like if we were to go to Google, technically we should see like some doc type HTML stuff, some meta content, search the world's information, blah, 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 blah. And this should be corresponding to what we see on Google, right? Well, when we do when we search on a browser, right? When I type in like Google on the browser and I go to Google's website, right? Remember what I said was happening in the background, right? There's a process called DNS that's being utilized by our computer to take this domain name, figure out the IP address, take that IP address, make a request to that particular IP address and get back some information. Clearly, we can't see all of that specifically in the terminal from that sake, but if we utilize another set of tools, we can actually see some of what's happening behind the scenes when we're making this particular request to Google. So that tool is called the Chrome Developer Tools. I use Brave as a browser, which is an extension of Google Chrome, so I still have access to the Google Chrome tools. But if you don't have if you don't have Google Chrome on your browser, or you don't use Brave like myself, you might not be able to do this. Firefox also has its own developer tools if you use Firefox. Safari has them, but they're whack. I would recommend either using Chrome or using Brave if you don't want to use Chrome because you are one of those people that are like gung-ho, I don't want to use Google Chrome. Or if you just use Firefox, Firefox is also dope. But one of the benefits of Google Chrome is the developer tools that Google has created to support developer work on web dev stuff. So if you go to view and you go to developer, you can see a number of different tools that you can use in order to interact with web pages that you're looking at. So view source is a pretty important one. This lets you see the source code of any website that you are going to, right? So if we kind of scroll through this source code a little bit, we see like this HTML, item scope, blah, 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 da, 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 meta content, see some Google stuff in here, and it's continuing. And yeah, it's just not very well formatted, but we're seeing some code that came back from Google, from the Google website stuff. So this is some of the code that comes back. That is the same stuff that we're getting coming back here in this curl request that we're seeing in the terminal, right? We made that request on command line, but we can also see that this request comes back with this big blob of information in the format of HTML. So when you want to look at a specific website's HTML code, you can do that very easily by using the Chrome developer tools view source. So another way to do that is if you don't want to go view developer source or whatever, you can right click and then you can click view page source, which will open the source code for you too. Google is clearly a very sophisticated website, so that's why the code looks crazy like that. So, you know, at the risk of, actually, no, let's just use the main website. So if we go back to the CERN website that we were looking at before, we should expect that this will be a little bit easier for us to read. And it definitely is, right? It's a little old school, so like they don't have as much stuff in here, but clearly we're looking at some HTML that corresponds to this particular website, right? See some tags, some elements in here. I'll zoom in a little bit. See some elements in here, right? They were using the bare minimum stuff at the time that they wrote this, but this code clearly is still working. They have a lot of anchor tags, and it must be the case that the anchor tag was really important to them when they were first building it. And that makes sense because they were saying, oh, HTML is all about, or HTTP, they made the hypertext to be able to link. So that's why we're seeing that right there, which is pretty dope. So you can go ahead and play around with any website that you want and take a look at kind of the source code. I was going to do a little, you know, funny thing for y'all. Let's just go to my little like random portfolio site I made when I was in when I was in my younger stages, let's put it that way. And if you go to view page source on something like this, you know, you can see a little bit more of a cleaner, old, like more modern HTML, but clearly the code itself is coming back as the source. This is the source code of that same web page. So when I look at this web page, what I'm really seeing, what really is making that possible is the HTML source behind the scenes. So the Google Chrome developer tools will allow us to see the source code of different sites. And that's really cool to know. Secondly, we can also inspect elements. And so inspecting elements is also a cool feature of the Google Chrome developer tools where like you can right click on different parts of a website, right? So let's say this image and then inspect it. And what it's going to do is it's going to show you all of the elements on that particular web page, right? And show you the particular HTML element that corresponds to that particular thing that you're looking at. So here I can see that there's an image tag that was used. Here's the little image and then some alt text that was there as well. But the cool thing about the HTML element selector from the Chrome developer tools is you can use it to really see what's going on a website, like element by element. And so it's a really important tool. Also, what comes back in the element selector tool is the CSS, any CSS that's tied to these elements and tied to this page. So clearly there's some CSS that I've used on this site to make it look a little decent. And if you know, you can, one of the cool features of the Chrome developer tools is without changing anything from the main site or the server where it's hosting this, I can actually interact with the CSS and change some things about it to kind of just troubleshoot stuff as well. So like, for instance, I have some stuff here, and I think like, you know, like if I'm messing around with turning off some of the CSS, clearly you can see that that's going to change. That's going to change some of the stuff going on my site, right? So The Chrome developer tools are really helpful for when you start actually trying to mess around with your websites and see, how is the HTML structured? What is the CSS tied to the different parts of the HTML, right? And then the last part of the Chrome developer tools that's important to know about is the console, which is the JavaScript console, which we'll talk a lot about in the next couple of classes. But the JavaScript console is where you can write JavaScript. So I could say let X, right? And then I can say, console.log X, right? And it's printing my name. What's is giving back these undefined things because of the fact that because this is a browser-based console, I actually could just like set up, I could actually just work with the variables directly without using vars or using console.log. But the console, what we call a JavaScript console, is where when you're manipulating JavaScript on a site, you can use the console here to log information and just kind of get status updates as to what's going on the page with regards to the JavaScript. So yeah, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the console, talking about JavaScript, playing around with stuff. So like, I could do something like A equals 5, B equals 10, A plus B, like, what I'm saying? Typical software stuff, what I'm saying? Typical programming language stuff like you could do within the console here in JavaScript. But what's cool about the JavaScript console is you can use the JavaScript to correspond to all of the HTML here that you're working with. So just a quick little example. Say I wanted to like, and we'll talk a lot more about this in future kind of settings and sessions, but say I want to like get more information on this particular element that I've highlighted here. The same element that I clicked here is the one highlighted over there. But one of the cool features of the Chrome developer tools is that when you're selecting an element, it gives it a really unique variable name that you can use in the console to refer to that element. So you see it says use $0 in the console to refer to this element. So if I go to the console and I type $0, right, I get that same element that I was just looking at there. And now I can like use JavaScript to manipulate and talk to, just talk through some of the pieces of that element as well. So we're going to talk a lot more about JavaScript in a bit. Also within the Google Chrome developer tools are some things related to the sources. So here is where you can see any source, like the source, more of the source code. So you can see the styles, the images, any of the other like APIs that are being utilized here. This site actually does not use MetaMask, but because your browser nowadays gets connected to like MetaMask for Web3 stuff, that's why that's there, just in case anybody was wondering. And then in the network tab, this is actually where you can see some of the network requests that are going on behind the scenes. So remember what I was saying before about how every time you make a request, right? A request gets back a response of some kind in a status. So clearly you can see that these statuses are 200. So if you remember what I was saying, 200 level requests are successful requests. So this, when this website loaded, it went to try to get all this information and it did so successfully. Got the font, got the image, got the CSS, it got whatever else it needed. You can actually see these requests on the Chrome developer tools. You can see kind of if you click the headers, you can see the request method that was used. So use the GET request at this particular URL to get back the information, right? And it got back a 304 status code, which is like means that it redirected. So it went to here and this went somewhere else to get back the information. We don't really know where, but we do know that it did it successfully and we got back the HTML that we're looking at here. So yeah, this is the Chrome developer tools is a really sophisticated set of tools. There's also some stuff related for performance. This is where you would go if like in a setting, if you were trying to test if, optimizing certain things on your screen, you can use the performance recordings to kind of see how long things take and things like that. Memory will show you anything saved on the page and anything like that. and the application will also show you certain things that are saved on the page, like cookies, or anything else as well. So you're going to get really familiar with the Chrome developer tools. If you're a developer, you're going to get familiar with any web developer tools like this because they're important to know in your workflow. The Chrome dev tools are really sophisticated, but also really helpful. So definitely encourage you to use some extension of them in your workflow. But you also have access to them in similar tools in like Mozilla and also in other web browsers. But Chrome by far has some of the more easier to use tools. And if you use Brave because you don't want to use Chrome, you also get access to those developer tools as well. So hopefully that all makes sense. If you're rocking what I'm saying, can I just get a quick like thumb up, check mark? All right, cool, groovy. Thank y'all. Appreciate that. Dope. So that's all I really wanted to say about this. We talked about a lot today. I'm going to send out more of the information from those particular slides. But what I would recommend that y'all do is find some sites you like, play around, look at their source code, see what you can learn about HTML by looking at their source code. Just hack around, you know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't mess up anything on their side for you to look up the source or change anything in the console dev tools. As soon as you refresh, it goes away. So have fun, poke around and learn a lot. Those are the vibes right there.